So news consumption on social media became the topic of my interest. Hence, for my project, I have produced a mini ethnographic research on the online community of a popular Facebook group, Maybe You Miss It Asking News. At its core, the focus of the study will be on the role of Facebook affordances in the immediate construction of collective beliefs, and consequently, its impact on an individual's perspective. About the structure, this presentation has two main parts. The first dives into the extent to which Facebook groups have impacted the way we circulate and engage with news. Then we'll progress to my thick description of an online argument when members are divided because of a conflicting personal and collective beliefs. Now, I would like to introduce the theoretical background of my work. The first is Durkheim's concept of social solidarity and the collective consciousness. In Division of Labor in Society, Durkheim refers to the communal belief and shared moral attitudes that are unified within a society as collective consciousness. However, he said, when this completely takes over us, our individuality collapses, as these two consciousnesses develop in opposite direction. Second is the theory of self-presentation that stems from the work of Erving Goffman. His theory helps explain the online presentation of the self in my work. The third is Urshan's Facebook material form in the Breakup 2.0. Her research about online breakups offers insight into the ways technology's material form is embedded in user experience, as well as its role in circulating information and presumed social narratives. The book is also invaluable for the concepts such as second-order information, mediate ideologies, remediation, and idiom of practice, which shed light on the significance of structure when talking about the consumption of news on Facebook. Other than these frameworks, Gert's introduction of thick description was also useful as it aids my interpretation when reading and analyzing user comments. Gert shows thick description as a method to unfold meaning in a semiotic stance, and emphasized that the detailed account of the occurrence needs to be placed in context to make the social relationship explicit. Much of our shared understanding of reality is instructed by the mass media. We learn about happening events by reading news, and because of that, our understanding is highly dependent on the portrayal and report of it. While formal news writing that all credible news publishers comply to ensure objectivity and fairness in journalism, news reports on Facebook that are written by members have fewer restrictions. An example would be the use of illustrations to explain the consequence of holding your. This post received so much engagement, up to 26,000 reactions. This is a post that demonstrates the use of comics as a new way of storytelling, something that cannot happen on news sites. I've also noticed the subjectivity clearly for posts that are about animals. As you can see the writing style of headlines and in the comments, writer used a lot of personalization. Animals were compared and associated with human attributes. While the content quality is for the knowledge about animal and their survival practice, the video that caught readers' attention are mostly the animals' cute or funny moments. From reading the comments and seeing how frequently this post genre appears, I find members of News embrace a positive portrayal a lot, especially when the topic is delivered in a way that readers can connect the subject to their values and sentiments. As you might have guessed from the title of this Facebook group, the post does not have to be the newest and recent topic, but can vary in case people haven't seen it before. The news report became friendlier because it includes somewhat of writer's subjectivity, and the choice of image video are less serious and more for entertainment purposes. Not only we are exposed to news that differ from the news genre we usually look for, we are also exposed to the wider public opinions about a topic. From my interview of Facebook users and my attempt to create a thick description of an online argument, I was able to see the impact of social force on a person's presentation of themselves and their belief system. Facebook has affordances that you can make use of to show support, and the more the support, the bigger the social influence. Especially in Facebook group, users are able to give the community awards. This is not a feature you can use outside of group. Community awards allows members to reward each other for their comments and contribution. But within the community of News, awards make a comment stand out and seem more insightful than usual. This builds up the social influence of that comment. Though at first, I thought such affordances can sometimes make people disagree, revise their opinions to be aligned with the communal values, and gain public acceptance. It was surprising to learn that their values and individuality remains unchanged. They are either refrain from expressing or are very determined to make others change their perspective and view the subject using their definition of it. Now I would like to compare the presentation of news on news sites versus on Facebook. Firstly, Facebook post format allows writers to recreate the presentation of a proper article. I have labeled similar features that make Facebook news reading experience similar to the reading on news sites. On the news sites, all articles have the same template. There's a headline, placeline, lead paragraph. There's also a like, share, and comment buttons on the side. Publish dates so you can see the recency. If you're on your phone, all you can see is the writing and the photos, which really focus on the news report itself. At the bottom of the article, there is a comment section. The use of this comment is what I will pay attention most to because how readers engage and consume news may reveal Facebook has similar features for you to interact with the news and for writers to present their writing in a similar format. However, I notice how socialization is always part of the experience when reading on Facebook, especially when you're on your phone. You will always see a small part of the comment section that highlights the top comments or most liked comment before you move on to the next post. Whereas on news sites, not all websites have the comment features, and if they do, the related news section is more prioritized and is placed before the comment section. There is always more engagement and discussion on F News than on popular news sites, so I asked people about their experience of each. I've collected their informant's feedback and put them on these sticky notes here. One informant says he rarely sees any comments, but if there is, he's likely to read them. He would like to know what most people think about the subject. Other informants also agree that there is not a lot of comments. Instead, they refrain from commenting because they care about who reads them, who can see their comments, who else uses this feature, but no one seems to bother commenting on news sites. One informant shows the affordance can sometimes be so poor that it makes her think the comment section is for people to report and give feedback on the writing rather than to leave their thoughts about the event itself. Overall, I noticed that people care a lot about the public's opinion. Feedbacks about comments featured on news sites show there isn't a lot of motive for people to leave their comments. The affordance is poor. Topics that receive the most comments are topics that speak up the communal belief of a large group. Goffin's theory helps explain why there is such an impact of the public on oneself. In the presentation of Self in Everyday Life, Goffin defines performance as all activities that occur during the period marked by this continuous presence of observers who has some influence on the performer. In this case, there is no audience and thus no motive to engage in front stage performance. The setting to comments is also inappropriate because they are not on a site that considers itself a social platform. Gershon would say that this is because the media ideologies they hold for news sites differ from media ideologies that they have for Facebook, which then leads to the change in the idiom of practice. So far, we've seen the importance of having a community to make the reading experience complete. Moving forward to what people said about the commenting features on Facebook, I noticed people mentioned wanting to read others' opinion, that they enjoyed reading their friends' conversation threads with others, and there are some people who mentioned tagging their friends. So I asked people more about the experience of tagging someone. I have translated what they said here for you to have a look at. In this particular case, this person and her friend often tag each other on their posts that review food and eating locations because they hang out and eat out a lot. So the motive behind tagging is the memory and mutual sentiments that they share. Compared to the comment features on news sites, Facebook affordance satisfies the temptation to share and discuss about the news. It makes the reading experience complete. I asked people more about why they tag their friends. As you can see in the chat conversation here, people don't just tag their friends for no reason. Tagging is not only a way to show others you remember about them, but sharing your thoughts about the apparent topic as you tag them is a way of sustaining the communal beliefs that you both share. So what about comments with no tags? From my observation of over 50 posts on Maybe You Missed This News, the comments with no tagging is usually a recount of a story that the news remind them of. In many cases, there is an implied audience when leaving personal opinion under a post, and the giving of awards and reacting to a comment is a way of showing support. When this happens, this means the person who comments says something that speaks for a large group, and what they said is aligned with a communal belief, morals, and attitudes. The reactions show a unified belief and in turn create a social force, and it can sometimes become a tool for expressing disagreement, which also create a social influence. In fact, let me demonstrate how angry reactions from anonymous members make people refrain from expressing too much of their opinion. Specifically, in a post regarding Vietnam and Thailand's statistic of previous matches prior to the AFF Championship semi-final, there was this comment that used informal pronouns to refer to anti-fans of Vietnam national football team and judged them for the lack of trust and national pride. This comment received angry reactions, and I noticed that it was edited multiple times. After each amendment, the degree of offensiveness was reduced. In this specific example, anti-fan used angry reactions as non-verbal tool to give off signs. Goffin called this impression management, when we are expressing ourselves in such a way to give others the kind of impression that will lead them to act voluntarily in accordance with our own plan. So far, we have seen that the affordances of community awards, likes, and reaction buttons of Facebook comments, and its role in indicating support. From my interview, people have shown that they are very cautious of how others perceive them, and by others, I'm referring to the implied audience a person has in mind, and this can vary. It could be their crush, their friends, their families, and relatives, whom they would like to present a certain front stage to. Before moving to the next part, a kind reminder that this study at its core is about how social force of a collective value impacts a person's perspective, and the role Facebook affordances has to play. At this point of research, I find Goffin's theory and Durkheim's theory of social integration are very well connected to each other. Goffman argues that as actors, we engage in impression management, while on the observer's perspective, or the implied audience that people in my interview care about, these people will attempt to form an impression of our identity, of who we are, and what's our personality like. While Goffman's impression and management said we decide what to show and hide, Durkheim argues that there are two consciousnesses within us, individual and collective, that is growing in opposite directions, and only one is more dominant than the other. He said that when this solidarity exercised its influence, our personality collapsed. Essentially, on occasions when our stance is in opposition with the collective values, Goffman would say that we will be staging a definition of a situation as we aim to have control of others' impression of us, while Durkheim suggests we either let the solidarity exercise its influence, make us change our mindset in accordance to others to become a collective being, or we value our personal perspective and be different to the rest. Hence, I have decided to look at wars and debates that happen on F News, as I think this would have a good content to see people respond when their personal perspective and stance is challenged. In the comment section of an article proposing to increase excise tax on alcohol, beer, and tobacco to protect people's health and increase budget revenue, there was an argument between smokers and non-smokers. Let me introduce the characters who are part of this conversation. HL is the first commenter of the entire thread who support the increase of excise tax. D and H do not talk about the news but are on the smoker side. X, who used to be a cigarette smoker for 7 years but has quit smoking for over a year now. And finally, we. This person joins in the conversation much later, is on X sides, but he tries to be as neutral as possible. Though I wish to go through the entire argument in this video, due to the time constraint, I have translated the conversation for you to read it in your own time, and I will now give you a brief recount of the argument and then my analysis of it. HL is the first to show their support for the proposal. HL said, "Totally support this. Can't bear people who blow smoke on me at the restaurants and think it was cool. Hope my dad would quit smoking as cigarettes become more expensive. He keeps smoking when it's cheap." But a person X feels offended as HL thinks smokers smoke because they think it's cool. Person X feels as if HL is saying they are trying to be cool or trying to show up values they don't have. So X replied, "Cool, huh? They smoke because they are addicted to it. What do you mean by cool?" And then the sarcastic smiley face. HL then replied, "I anti people who smoke next to me. Blow it to my face, okay? To be straightforward, hate means hate." This receives 4 likes and 1 heart. Later in this conversation, D and H also joined in to make assumptions about smokers' motive for smoking. This offended X further because he is 1, actually not supporting the habit, but people don't seem to acknowledge this. 2, he's offended because of the assumptions all smokers was trying to show off. We joined in much later in the argument, but he encouraged X to ignore and said as long as there is no smoking at places with smoking bans or where there are pregnant women, then it would be okay. To sum up, X and we would argue that 1, we smoke because we got addicted, not because we think it's cool. 2, it's an addiction and I was too immature to make the right choice, but that does not mean I was to show off the whole time. 3, you don't smoke because other drinkers started to smoke. It's your brain that craves cigarettes when you drink alcohol. 4, as long as we don't smoke at places with smoking bans or where there are pregnant women, then it should be okay. On the other side, the other people's stance would be, addiction is what keeps you going, not the motivation at the start. You thought it was cool to smoke, so you did. 2, you are like those immature kids in high school trying to be an adult and act cool by smoking. 3, smoking or not is a choice. 4, we can still drink without being influenced by others to smoke. The conversation continues, but due to the time limit, I would like to begin my interpretation. I'm no psychologist, however, from my attempt to recreate this argument with a person who I know is a smoker, the response and feedback give me a glimpse to the value and belief system each stance hold. On the surface, both parties agree that smoking is bad, and they are just arguing and getting offended because of 2 different things, and clearly neither HL nor D show they understand why X is offended. Or they probably ignored it. However, at a deeper layer of meaning, we can see that X, who used to be a cigarette smoker, was offended because smokers were regarded as immature idiots trying to act cool. And this is an attribute that I extracted from what non-smokers said in the conversation. And X was looking for others' understanding. X wanted others to change their point of view. If you notice by the use of collective pronouns, X tried to persuade others, and many others, not just people who are in the conversation, that rather than seeing smokers as those who are trying to show off, X wanted them to see smoking as something motivated by pure addiction. their definition and emotional attachment to addiction are so different from each other. Perhaps by addiction, X is implying the medical definition of it, an addiction that causes people to act irrationally when they don't have the substance that they are addicted to in their system. He is conveying how dependence on the substance makes smoking difficult to withdraw. Or if he shares the same perspective with my interviewee, he just hopes the conversation could end and people would just stop judging and see things as it is, because he believes that smokers know smoking is a bad habit and there is no point convincing them any further. H&D receives more public support, and this can be explained by Durkheim as he talks about crime. We can say an act is criminal when it offends strong and defined states of the collective consciousness. This is the opposition that determines what is crime rather than arising as the effect of it. The non-smokers in this conversation never once complain about the risk when being exposed to secondhand smoke during pregnancy or its impact on the environment. Instead, they stand from their position as non-smokers and cheer at those who are in the opposite side. Notice how D included his dad in the argument and compared smokers with immature high school kids. The build-up of reactions for H and D created a social influence that seeks to dissuade cigarette smoking. Each side tried to persuade the other side their definition of addiction and smoking. And this is exactly what Goffman described when he discussed about the control we have over our presentation of the self to achieve our social goal. And this control is achieved largely by influence the definition of the situation, by expressing himself in such a way as to give them the kind of impression that will lead them to act voluntarily in accordance with his own plan. Both include others in their reasoning to make them appear supported and rightful. The Facebook reactions and awards were means for outsiders to show their support, their stance, who they are citing as a way to participate as social force. X, the person whose personal conscience was challenged by the collective sentiments, recognized his flaws, but still tried to influence his definition of the subject being discussed. H and D recognize their stand is aligned with the general public, so they keep reinforcing their definition of what is a bad habit. Taking everything into account, in response to the role Facebook affordances in the mediated construction of collective beliefs and its impact on an individual's perspective and their presentation of themselves, this study shows that the affordance and material form of Facebook was the tool for both verbal and non-verbal expression when creating and sustaining a social influence. While comments allow verbal expression of an opinion, members use Facebook reactions and community awards as a tool for non-verbal participation and impression management to show their support and their stance. As top comments receive the most reactions and awards, Facebook affordance allow users to recognize highly valued opinions and comments. These are indicated by the extent of reactions, which represent the public's acceptance and alignment with the collective sentiments. In the private space, but not so private space of ad news, whether a person chooses to be opinionated or not, the news reading experience becomes complete with the inclusion of a sociable community. Though this means being exposed to wider opinions, a person believes and individuality are unchanged, yet they can choose to influence others with their definition of the subject or remain offstage. Even when someone refrains from commenting, Facebook's structure provides other means for them to participate and engage with the community they are part of.